On this episode of the Metal Command podcast, Kreator has a brand new single on a brand new album coming out in January. That has been released. Testament releases a second single off of their upcoming album, Parabellum, which comes out October 10th, 2025. Jon Schaffer had a lot to say about two of the former members of Iced Earth in a recent interview with Podcast of the Wicked. And Sebastian Bach throws a temper tantrum at a concert and kicks out a fan. All of that coming up next here on the Metal Command podcast.
You are listening to the Metal Command podcast.
Greetings and welcome back to another edition of the Metal Command podcast. Tony here with you. Always excited, of course, to have everybody here and to talk to all of you today. And if you do want to support this show, by all means, the best way you can do that is to subscribe to the podcast, like the video, share the video, leave a comment on the video, let me know what you think about what I talk about today. And of course, click that little bell to be notified anytime I do post any kind of content. And if you follow the show on any other form of social media, please give the show a like and a follow there. A lot to get to, as always. Sebastian Bach throws a massive temper tantrum on a fan on stage. I'm going to comment on that whole situation because, obviously he's receiving a lot of flack for that. Jon Schaffer was on the Podcast of the Wicked, and he had a lot to say about a few of his former members, most notably Stu Block and Hansi Kirsch. And what he said about Stu, of course, created this huge uproar on social media with most of the media outlets talking about it. And basically he basically said Stu Block pulled a poser move on him. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that snippet from that interview, and also talk about Hansi Kirsch a little bit and the differences between how Hansi handled the situation that happened with Jon as compared to Stu Block. Kreator, of course, has a brand new single coming out. That comes out January 16th. The album comes out January 16th. Sorry, it's called Crushers of the World. The brand new single is called Severed Serpents. It's an incredible song, and I have a lot to say about that. But let me start off with another single that was just released, because this is off of an album that is coming out very soon on October 10th, 2025. I want to start the show off on a positive note, talking about the brand new Testament song called Shadow People, off of the upcoming album Parabellum, which comes out October 10th, 2025. I'll throw some pre-order info in the show notes for you all to pre-order the album if you haven't done so already. Typically, Nuclear Blast, the band's label, is probably the best place to do that. However, they do have what I think is going to be an outstanding album coming out. Also, many of you have emailed me and messaged me asking me what was the first album by Testament that I ever listened to and how did I get into the band. So I'll touch on that in this segment as well, because it's actually an interesting story. And I'll give you a hint, folks. I didn't like Testament when I first heard them, and I'll tell you why. Anyway, let's talk about the song. So we had the first song, Infanticide AI. To me, I was floored by how incredibly well written and well performed and how great that song sounded. For me personally, it's probably one of the best songs I've ever heard from Testament. He had a little bit of that black metal influence in it, which of course, Eric's a black metal fan, obviously, with the Dragon Lord project that he's had in the past. And I think he added a few of those. They added a few of those elements in that song, and I was absolutely blown away. I'm like, man, this is like one of the best tracks I've ever heard this band record. And now we have a song called Shadow People, which is a much different track. And again, I like it. It's got more of a groove-oriented sound. And this is a sound that a lot of the Bay Area bands have developed over the years. Like Exodus does, writes songs with this kind of groove, kind of riffing going on. But overall, I think it's another excellent single. And so it's kind of a tale of two tracks, because this one, in my opinion, is a lot different than Infanticide AI. It's a little bit slower. It's not as up-tempo. It's not as upbeat. And it's obviously a longer song. And, it really depends on your preferences. Now, personally, as much as I love this track, I think Infanticide AI was probably, in my opinion, I like that single better. But I think the reason I like that song a lot better is Shadow People is the type of track Testament has written before. Whereas Infanticide is not something you would typically hear from them. Now, you do hear some influences, that sound like that track on other albums here and there. But man, I'm really looking forward to this upcoming Testament album. The last couple have been okay. I think Brotherhood of the Snake I thought was probably a little bit of a letdown for me. Still a pretty decent record. But I think this upcoming album, Parabellum, it's going to be incredible, folks. I cannot wait to review it and to check it out. But essentially, if I'm going to compare the new single to, Shadow People, to the old one, not the old one, but the previous one, I would say I like Infanticide better. And it's really a matter of preference because they're both pretty, they're both different tracks. But Infanticide AI, to me, is an incredible track. Shadow People is good. I don't like it as much as the previous single, but I am really looking forward to the album. And I think Shadow People also is kind of a little bit of more of a safer song to put out there. But again, with Testament, world-class players, world-class production, outstanding songwriting. Chuck Billy, as always, an incredible vocal delivery. And he really can't, I don't think anyone's going to be able to go wrong when it comes to thrash metal. Nobody's going to go wrong with this album. So definitely looking forward to the record. I look forward to reviewing it. And I think this new track is good. I just don't like it as much as the previous single. Now, as far as how I ended up getting into Testament, well, it's an interesting story, isn't it? Because this was a band when I was young. And now keep in mind, I was getting into heavy metal at the dawn of the grunge era. So all the grunge bands were big. It was really hard to find heavy metal CDs in stores. Obviously, there was no streaming. You didn't have high-speed internet. There was no downloading. So really, you had to go by word of mouth, buy a CD or cassette back then, and take a chance on a band. And so I had been hearing about Testament from friends of mine, talking about Alex Skolnick is this incredible lead player. The band writes all these great songs. I heard of, albums like Practice What You Preach and The Legacy and The New Order. And I'd heard about all these really, incredible albums that this band had done. But because it was during the grunge era, it was very, very difficult to find music by this band in a music store because that's where you had to go to get music. Is you had to go to music stores. I mean, they did have a form of mail order back then. However, it was very problematic. I was young. I didn't have a credit card, so I couldn't just call a number and order an album. So I had to go to a local music store. Finally, early 1994 happens, and I'm finally able to get a copy of a Testament album. I finally found one music store that had a copy of the album. And the album, when I heard it, I was a little disappointed. And I almost wrote the band off. And the album in question is the album The Ritual, which I found on a cassette tape. I couldn't even find it on CD. And I remember hearing Electric Crown. And I'm like, man, everybody talks about this band. I mean, it's okay. And looking back on that album, I like it a lot better than I did when I first heard it. But I almost wrote the band off. Because, again, being that is the only record available to me at the time, I had to think to myself, man, this is the album that came out a couple years ago, 3 years ago, whenever it was. This is this band everybody's raving about, and I'm not really feeling it. Well, as 1994 moved on, Testament had a new album coming out called Low. And then miraculously, their back catalog started appearing in music stores. So, again, what will typically happen, at least back then, you would always notice that when a band was coming out with a brand new album, they would do a run on their back catalog and, sell it, to try to get some, CD sales or record sales, along with the new album that's being promoted. So Low came out, or was coming out. And I remember when that happened, suddenly the music store that I went to most frequently, I found a CD copy of The Legacy and The New Order. And I thought, a lot of my friends raved about these albums. None of them mentioned The Ritual, but they did mention these two records. So I took a chance. They were like, I don't know, $8.99, something like that per album. So I bought both of them. And I remember first hearing the guitar solos in this song Over the Wall off of The Legacy. And immediately I was like, man, now I know what everybody was talking about when it comes to this band. And then, of course, Practice What You Preach. I ended up finding that because that ended up coming in. Souls of Black ended up coming in. So I ended up with those 4 records and then The Ritual. And then Return to the Apocalyptic City, the EP. And then pre-order the album Low. And Low, to me, is still one of the band's most underrated, underappreciated albums. I used to listen to that record all the time back then. So that is how I ended up getting into Testament. That is how I discovered them. For those of you that are wondering about what my favorite Testament album is, it is definitely, for me, Dark Roots of the Earth. It's actually my favorite album cover by the band as well. But that may change. That may change with this upcoming album. I don't know 100% yet. I haven't heard it, but I'm definitely interested in checking that album out, and I can't wait to review it. But it could dethrone Dark Roots of the Earth. Who knows? But the 2 singles that have come out have definitely really, really made me very excited about this record. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about the next subject here. Let's talk about the ridiculous situation that happened with Sebastian Bach. Before I show you the video, let me give you a summary of what happened. So, Sebastian Bach went on stage, flipped out on some chick in the crowd, told security to kick her out, and according to him, while he was on stage, it was because this woman had interrupted a conversation between Sebastian and his wife because she wanted a hug. And then it later came out after the video, after the video, went viral on TikTok and everywhere else, that witnesses were saying this woman was heckling him while he was on stage. And then a photo appeared from the woman in question that was allegedly heckling him, saying, yep, it was me. And there was a middle finger up pointed at Sebastian Bach. Now, whether it was hers or not, I don't know. However, she posted in the comments of one of the pages on Facebook, I don't remember which one it was, admitting who she was and showing that photo of a middle finger sticking up at Sebastian. Obviously, the way he handled this situation was actually the wrong way to handle it. Let me show you the video. Let me show you the video of him flipping out. And then I'm going to give you my thoughts on the whole entire situation. Check this out.
Hey, this get her the out of here. She comes up while I'm talking to my wife saying, hey, can Sebastian give me a hug? I'm not a monkey. Get your ugly ass the out of here. Get her the out of here. Ready for the next one?
Okay, so that's Sebastian Bach flipping out, going off on that chick. Obviously, the swear words were all beeped out. There were so many out there, and I'm not going to put the actual unedited version of the video where he's swearing because obviously YouTube doesn't like that. But that is him flipping out on this chick. Folks, when it comes to an unruly fan, first of all, the way that he handled this situation is 110% the wrong way to handle this kind of situation. And if you're in a band, take note about what I say. Because as much as I love Sebastian Bach's music, and as much as I love him as a singer, and as much as I loved his last solo album, which was, in the top 10 for my albums of the year list, when it came out, this kind of conduct and this kind of thing truly, in my opinion, is what holds this guy back. Now, before I get into how he mishandled the situation, let me say this. First of all, I'm not going to get into who was right or wrong. I have, seen musicians get out of line with fans. I've seen it. I have gone to numerous heavy metal shows over the last 30 years. I have seen musicians get out of line with fans. I have seen fans get out of line with musicians. I have been backstage for numerous interviews when I was doing my radio show. And I have seen fans get out of line. Now, here's the thing, folks. I don't know what happened between Sebastian and this woman. I didn't see it. And to be honest with you, I'm not going to comment on whatever that confrontation might have been because I wasn't there. If you go and ask either one of them, both of them, like if you go and ask Sebastian, he's going to give you a story that's favorable to him, and she's going to do the exact same thing. And personally, I really don't care what happened between them. Because the situation itself, the way it was handled, let's say for argument's sake, she was wrong. It doesn't take away the fact he completely mishandled this. Now, as I've said, I have seen fans get out of line with musicians. I think it's fair to bring this up. You hear about Christina Scabbia. For those that don't know who she is the singer for Lacuna Coil. She had stalkers. She had to have like a security detail with some of these stalker fans that would, harass her, or whatever the case may be. I have seen women at metal shows not want to take no for an answer for a hug or whatever the case may be. I have seen musicians in general get harassed by fans to where it really did cross the line. Now, folks, many of you probably don't realize this, but it happens more than you think. It's just that most of you don't see it. And do you know why? It's because how these situations are typically handled. So if a musician, let's say a fan is getting out of line with a musician before a show, the way it gets handled most of the time is that musician tells security, this person's harassing me, please escort them out of the building. Done. 99.9% of the venue doesn't know about it, doesn't hear about it. Nobody's getting humiliated in public. And life is good. The show goes on with no drama. Okay. If it happens, now this was not his show from what I understand. He was a guest. If it happens in a small club like that where the musician is getting heckled, most of the time, the way that situation gets handled is between songs, that musician says something to security that this person is harassing and heckling him or her. That person gets escorted out and asked not to come back in. That is the professional and classy way to handle that kind of situation. That's not how he handled it, folks. What he did is he put on a spectacle. He threw a temper tantrum on stage. And what that in turn does, it doesn't do anything to her. Because at this point, let's say if she did something wrong, and I don't know if she did, and I really don't care if she did at this point. Like she certainly didn't do anything wrong enough to the point where this guy had to flip out and humiliate her and drop all these, the C word and everything else on her. I don't think she probably deserved that. Because if she did, and if she did something bad enough to where it necessitated those adjectives that he used to try and describe her, I pretty much guarantee you she probably would have been tossed out well before the show. Well before the show started. So he goes up on stage and flips out. And what are some of the first comments that you see? He's bullying women. He's classless. He hasn't grown up. People point the finger and say, see how he's acting? This is why Skid Row won't have a reunion with him. They point at him and say, this is why he doesn't play bigger stages. People point the finger at him, and he makes himself look bad. And think about it. If Skid Row, like if there was a reunion, which I'm sure isn't going to happen at this point, I'd be shocked if it did. All they got to do, when Skid Row goes, we're going to go on a long search for a vocalist. And when they say, well, we don't want Sebastian Bach in the band, it's not going to happen. And people ask why. They point at that video. They point and say, that's why. And then he, whether it's fair or unfair, gets seen as the bad guy. And it does not, now, obviously, some people say he did it for publicity. I don't think he did it for that. I just think he just became unhinged, irrational, and flipped out. We've seen some of the tweets he posted after the presidential election, which he took down, talking about hating America. This guy, the narrative surrounding this dude from a lot of people is that he's childish, difficult to work with, and he's immature. Now, I don't personally know him, but people point at him when something like this happens and say, see, we're right. Folks, we should be talking about this guy's musical talent. We should be talking about how incredible his solo albums are. The last one in particular being probably, in my opinion, my favorite album he has ever done. I even like it better than what he did in Skid Row. This man should be playing bigger stages, because I can tell you what, he's not playing bigger stages because of talent. He definitely has that. The quality of the music is incredible. But then promoters see stuff like this, and fans see stuff like this, and they get turned off by it. The record label complained about him not having a big following on Spotify. Now, I think part of that is the demographic of people that follow him. But when a younger audience sees this guy do this, what do? They think, I'm turned off by this. I don't want to support this dude. They go to something else. The point I'm trying to make, folks, is that we live in an age of TikTok, Facebook Reels, YouTube Shorts, things like that, which get captured on video. And if you conduct yourself poorly, it is going to go viral everywhere. And then people are going, whether it's fair or unfair, people are going to develop an opinion of who you are as a person, and they're going to point to that incident or other incidents. It doesn't just apply to Sebastian Bach. It applies to a lot of other people. But this is a classic example of mishandling a situation that could have been handled in a much easier way. And it's sad. I actually think it's sad because I like this guy's music. I would love to see him do better than what he's doing, playing bigger shows than what he normally does. But this is what holds him back. this kind of conduct is probably part of what held him back from the Skid Row reunion. Now, Skid Row could also be part of that problem because they've gone through, I don't know how many singers now since Sebastian left. So, I'm sure it's a two-way thing here. But you can't act like that, folks. Because you are going to make yourself look so bad acting like this. Eventually, nobody's really going to want much to do with you. Now, I hope that doesn't happen to him. But the guy is 57 years old. Going up on stage doing that is something an 18-year-old would do. It would be different if someone threw a bottle at his head again, like they did back in the late 80s when he went into the crowd. I could see getting angry. That's not what happened. He had a confrontation he didn't like with a fan, and he flipped out on stage about it and made it a point to try and publicly humiliate this woman, who clearly, from what I saw in the Facebook post of her commenting, probably laughed at him, which makes him look even worse. Bands and musicians, don't do this. Don't act like this. Conduct yourself with more class and more professionalism. There's the right way and the wrong way to handle stuff. Okay, with that, I'm going to go into the break, and after the break, I'm going to talk about the recent interview with Jon Schaffer, where he talks about Stu Block and Hansi Kirsch and why that segment caused such an uproar on social media. And then I'm going to talk about the brand new Kreator single, which I think is, which I think is an incredible single. I am really, really looking forward to their upcoming album in January. So all of that coming up here after the break. Tony here from the Metal Command podcast. Since 1998, I have hosted this show, which started off as a radio show and, of course, is now in the world of podcasting. That's right. I've hosted this show since 1998, and I've had the privilege of speaking to so many great bands and artists over the years, and I appreciate the following and support I am receiving from all of you. The show has definitely grown a lot over the last year, and I would love your support. If you have not yet done it, please hit the subscribe button here on YouTube and follow the show on any other form of social media. Now, back to the second half of this episode. Okay, welcome back to the Metal Command podcast. Tony here with you. And let's get into the second half of this show. So, began the show talking about the newest Testament single called Shadow People, and how I ended up getting into the band, because I had a few emails asking me that, like asking me what my first Testament album was. And I touched on that. And of course, I talked about Sebastian Bach throwing his little temper tantrum on stage over some woman asking him for a hug while he was talking to his wife. So let's get into the second half of the program, of course, and get into the next subject here, which has a point of controversy in it. The other morning I woke up, started going down my social media feed, and all I saw in most of the Facebook posts from a lot of these metal media outlets was a headline that said something along the lines of Iced Earth's Jon Schaffer says former Iced Earth vocalist Stu Block is a poser. And this was in reference to an interview that he had just conducted with Metal Rose on Podcast of the Wicked, which was a fan question interview. And he was talking about how the former members of his band, or both bands, if you want to talk about Demons and Wizards as well, how some of them handled the situation with him in the press better than others. And of course, Stu Block's name came up and Hansi Kirsch's name came up. And he basically said that Stu Block putting up a post, which I'll put up right here in front of me, basically cheering on the incident, and then took the post down after, of course, people started reacting negatively to it, and then put up a post condemning it and indirectly condemning Jon when you actually read the headline of the post. And Jon said that was a poser move. And of course, everyone that watched this interview that was at some sort of metal media outlet, almost everybody put this post up saying Jon says Stu is a poser. And then subsequently, Stu Block on his Facebook page says he feels really gutted right now. And I'm going to assume that is in reference to that interview. Let me say a few things first before I show you the interview clip and comment on it. Number one, I think Stu Block is an incredible vocalist. I think his performance on the second version of the Annihilator album called Metal, I think it's called Metal 2, I think his performance on that was outstanding. Stu also sang on my favorite Iced Earth album, Dystopia. And I do like some of Into Eternity's material as well. I do like some albums they have put out. I think the guy's an incredible vocalist. And I don't know him personally. I've never interacted with the guy at all. I can only really judge him by his posts. And clearly the guy is a very, very talented singer. So I want to preface it by saying that. And after this interview clip, I'm also going to talk to you about the differences between how Stu Block handled everything in the press in regards to the incident that Jon was involved in compared to Hansi Kirsch. Because I think it's important to explain the differences between how both of these guys handled that situation. Now, I do want to stress that I completely understand the cancel culture out there that was trying to cancel both Hansi and Stu. And I want to make sure that whatever I say is not what I think of them as a person, because I don't know Stu Block. And I've had pretty good contact with Hansi, and I'll explain some stuff after this video, but I want to put it out there that I think Stu's an outstanding musician. And Jon saying what he did, to be honest, when you watch this clip, it was not said with any type of malice or hate at all. In fact, Jon is actually quite proud of the work that him and Stu Block did together in Iced Earth. Check out this clip, and you'll see what I'm talking about right here.
I mean, my wish is that they would stop hating on Stu and on Hansi and on, I don't see it because I'm not on that, but you tell me, people tell me the things that have been said. The amount of bots that were, Elon Musk exposed that on Twitter. He said he thought like 93% of the accounts were bots. So there was a lot of stuff going out that were giving the people the illusion that there's this, they're sort of like the false reality makers. The guys were pressured. Some guys handled it better. Some guys handled it very weak and kind of pathetic. And I think the biggest issue when it comes to Stu is that he made a post like cheering it on and then flipped, and that looks like a total poser move. You know what? It is a total poser move. But it's okay. Forgive him. We did some great work together. I had some of the best times in my life with Stu. I mean, when we toured, the Plagues album was different, another one of those situations where I was wedged in. I was going through a divorce right then when it was all happening while we're in we rented this castle in Germany to rehearse and write. And then we recorded, I ended up working that album at like 4 different studios. And it's one of those moments, periods where I wasn't as engaged as I should have been and dealing with a lot of personal stress. That stuff affects you if you're a true artist. It does. It's gonna have a result on the end product. You want every recording to be fun. But to get back to the point, I have very precious memories with Stu. So please just forgive him. I forgive him. And he, it's everybody is a flawed human being. And the thing is, with Hansi and I are still close, and we are always going to be. And the difference is that we talked before I turned myself in several times. And I knew what was coming because the pressure he was under, and he hated it. But it's a witch hunt. It was a witch hunt. And, it is what it is. I mean, it's a bummer because we write great stuff together, and we were on a serious trajectory. I mean, the last show I played in Europe, headlining Wacken on Saturday night in front of 100,000 people. And it was fantastic. And Slayer went on after us, and about 70% of the crowd left. And it was their last show in Germany. I mean, I'm just saying that's what happened. I was pretty shocked. But I mean,
wow.
It was a great, the reunion tour of Demons and Wizards was hugely successful. And we had an amazing contract, actually, a really, really amazing contract. But, Hansi had to do what he had to do. It is what it is. I treasure the memories that I've had with Hansi, and we're going to have more. There's probably not musically. I doubt that's ever going to happen. I don't even know if I'm going to do music again. That's off the table right now. But just as brothers, nothing's going to change that. So please don't, if you're going to, I'm all about free speech, man. I am. I'm just asking, try to be a good human about this. You have the freedom to say that. I don't censor anything that I don't have the ability to now. But even when I had the admin access to those pages, people can talk shit. There was only one or two times where there was some really vile, hateful stuff directed at Stu that I deleted those posts. But I've never done that because I don't really care. I mean, I believe in freedom. You're allowed to say what you want to say. But let's forget all the division and stuff. People, I'm not an angel. I have behaved poorly in the past. I've made mistakes. Everybody has. So let's just forget all that and let's focus on the good stuff because we did a lot of good shit together. I mean, we really did. But with both of those guys, and it was the cancel culture mob mentality, it's real. And if you're not really strong and really of your convictions, it's going to have an effect, so it's like, I get it. And I don't hold any ill will. And I would really love for the fans to just let it go and celebrate this catalog that's hanging up behind me was done with a lot of very talented, cool people. I mean, that's something to, whatever drama, whatever shit's happened, let's let it go. I mean, I don't have any, I really don't have any ill will. I know his true colors, so that's a good thing. So it's like, I'm not interested in hanging out like we did. And I have no interest in that, but I still,
Sure.
He's a part of the band's history and we did some great stuff together. So, and I wish him well.
Okay. So you heard Jon Schaffer talking about Hansi and Stu. Let's start off with the core of the headlines that people are talking about, like the Stu as a poser thing. So right here in front of me, here's the post Stu Block put up, which he later took down. And he's basically almost seems like he's cheering on the incident. And then, of course, after that, he puts up a post condemning it. Basically saying he would never have anything to do with anyone that was at the January 6th protest. And that is the point of contention that Jon has. Now, when you listen to that interview clip, Jon's not out there saying people should hate Stu Block. Jon is out there basically saying he forgives the guy. He is proud of the work and the memories he has with the guy. But very nicely put it out there that he won't ever have anything to do with them again. I think the way Jon stated this, he couldn't have put it any nicer than he did. I mean, realistically, he's actually out there trying to get people to not hate Stu Block. Here's my take on the whole incident. When Jon says that it's a poser move, let's call it what it is. It's a poser move. He put up a post. Stu Block puts a post up basically showing that he's cheering the incident on. Then when the pressure came, he took it down and condemned it. Because the cancel culture came for him and he caved to it. That is a poser move. And if I'm Jon Schaffer, then I'm looking at that like this guy just pretty much stabbed me in the back. You're going out there saying that you're sticking with me, and then you're basically saying, oh, you want nothing to do with me anymore, and you're basically condemning me now. That is a poser move. And if I were Jon, I understand completely where he's coming from on this. It's basically, I'm going to forgive you, but I'm not going to forget. And he put it in a very nice way. One of the things about this thing as well with Stu Block is I didn't realize how many Jon Schaffer supporters actually have been bashing Stu for the last 4 years. I mean, I started looking through Facebook groups, and there's a lot of hate for this guy from that group of people. Here's what I'm going to say. These people that are hating on him, that are big Jon Schaffer supporters, a lot of these people are going out and saying Jon made a mistake and that he should be forgiven for it. And that people should give him a second chance. Don't you think the same thing applies to Stu Block? Because on one hand, these people are saying you guys need to forgive Jon for making a mistake, but they don't want to forgive Stu Block for making a mistake. Because that's exactly what he did. He screwed up big time. Big time. You can't change it, folks. You know, there are people like, I'm not going to listen to Dystopia anymore or Plagues of Babylon. You know, I think that attitude is ridiculous. If you listen to that interview clip with Jon Schaffer talking about him working with Stu Block, he's extremely proud of the albums they made together. And he should be. He should be proud of them. Stu Block should be proud of them. Because his vocal performance on all of those records was outstanding. Let me give you guys a real life analogy here. Because I can relate to Jon Schaffer when he talks about, you know, I'm proud of the work I did with Stu. I forgive him. Don't hate the guy. But he basically said at the end, I'm really not going to be hanging out with this guy. Essentially stating that he'll have nothing to do with him. It is okay to be proud of work that you've done with somebody, even after you've had a falling out with them. I'll give you a real life story for myself. So for those of you that know me well, or know my background, you know I have done a lot of photography work. Now, it has nothing to do with the heavy metal scene, but I was doing photos and taking photos and writing articles for what I would consider a world-class publication. I took a lot of racing photos. In my opinion, I did some great work. But more importantly, the people involved in that publication and that magazine also did incredible work. And I was really just a cog in the wheel that made that thing work. The editor of the magazine did an outstanding job putting that thing together. The layout was great. The variety of topics that we visited in that magazine was outstanding, especially, you know, compared to anything else out there in the car hobby. And it was a great run for me. But some things happened where I left. There were some things that were highly disappointing to me. There was a loss of respect for myself for some of the people involved with it. And I decided to leave. And I will never have anything to do with any of those people ever again. Do I forgive them? Sure. Do I have this like built up hatred towards anybody there? Absolutely not. And even though I will never have anything to do with anybody there, what I will tell you is that I am extremely proud of not only the work that I did there with them, but I am extremely proud to have been part of something that was great. So even though I will never have anything to do with any of these people, it still doesn't mean I can't celebrate the work that was done, both by myself and the people involved in that magazine. And that is essentially what Jon is saying about Stu Block. Great times, great memories, did some great stuff together. And he forgives the guy, but he doesn't forget. And that is the underlying message. Let it go, move forward from it. Because for me, here's the thing. I'm going to check out the next Into Eternity album. And for all we know, Stu Block if Stu Block probably thinks back at that, he probably wishes he could take that mistake back. But what's said is said and what's done is done. I think it's time people move forward from it. Now, here's how I would have handled this situation. If it were me, being involved, because here's the thing. When you put up a post like that, and then you take it down and put up something completely the opposite of what you put up right before that because you caved to the pressure, a lot of people are going to think you're a phony. A lot of people are going to think that you're really not sincere in what you are saying. Because there's a lot of Jon Schaffer's supporters that have not forgotten that. And it still gets brought up. And I think these people just need to move past it at this point. If I were Stu Block, and if I were in that position, you know what I would have done? And I'm talking about when the whole thing started. I would have kept my mouth shut. I would have probably called Jon and said, I'm just going to kind of not say anything about it. I'm going to keep quiet about it. And I'm just going to kindly sort of sail off into the sunset until everything blows over and more information about the incident comes out. That's how I would have handled it. And you know who handled it that way? Hansi Kirsch handled it that way. Now, in that video clip I showed you, he talked about the fact Hansi and him did talk before he went to jail. And they did talk about the situation, probably talked about how they were going to handle it. Because then Hansi, of course, they put up a post, he quits Demons and Wizards. But I'm willing to bet that when they had that conversation, they talked about the best way to handle that situation. And then Hansi pretty much kept quiet about it up until last year, where he said he thinks Jon Schaffer deserves a second chance. That is the way the situation should have been handled. That is how Stu Block should have handled that problem. Instead, he jumped the gun, made a post, caved to the pressure, and then completely contradicted himself. And that is where the hatred for him comes from. Folks, I'm still going to listen to Dystopia. I'm still going to check out the next Into Eternity album. The man is a human being. He made a mistake. Do I blame Jon for feeling the way that he does? Absolutely not. In fact, if I were in his position, I probably wouldn't have been as nice about it as Jon was. However, Jon was very straightforward. He wanted the fans to know where he stood with Stu Block. And he really could not have put that any better than the way that he did. Now, I really have nothing against Stu. That incident would never stop me from covering anything that he does, from reviewing any of the albums he sings on, from talking about any of the albums that he sings on. Again, I think the guy's an incredible vocalist. But you can't take the incident away. It happened. And in my opinion, I think people just need to move on from it. Forgive, but don't forget. On one last note, one of the things I think that was really cool about that interview, and I didn't put it in the video, I didn't put that video clip in here, is the reissue of Sons of Liberty. I honestly think that is something that has been long overdue. And personally, if Jon is going to do something musically, just by the interviews that I've seen, I think musically this is probably going to be the thing that he does, possibly. You know, when that Sons of Liberty album came out, folks, a lot of people really had no idea about most of the subject matter on it. But now a lot of that is out in the open. There's a lot of alternative media covering a lot of that stuff. There are a lot of podcasts talking about these things. But back then, nobody really knew about any of this stuff. Nobody really paid attention to it. But in the last 9 or 10 years, people started to pay attention, and now you are hearing people talking about it openly. So I think a reissue for that album is going to be a lot more powerful now than it was back then. And personally, I would love a reissue of that on vinyl. They talked about some album artwork, some new album artwork. I think that would be really cool. And I would love for him to do a sequel to that, put another record out. And it's something he could do quite easily himself. You get a couple of musicians that you trust to play on it. You write the songs, you record them. You don't really need to tour with it unless you wanted to. But I think if I'm going to guess what this man will do next musically, it will have something to do with that. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty much going to say it will have something to do with that. So again, folks, I understand the anger towards Stu Block. I also think that the guy, I mean, folks, I think you guys should forgive the dude. For the people that dislike him over what happened, if you are out there clamoring for forgiveness for Jon, be consistent. You should forgive this guy and move on from the incident. Jon clearly has moved on from it. He clearly has no hatred for the guy. He's not telling you to not say anything. And it doesn't even mean, I mean, forgiving the guy doesn't mean you have to support the bands that he's singing in. It just means you just put the incident past you and you're done with it. Because some of these Facebook groups, Jon Schaffer supporter Facebook groups, are pretty brutal on Stu. But again, I get it. But the man made a mistake. I think we should let it go. Anyhow, I want to give props to Metal Rose from Podcast of the Wicked. That was a great interview. I listened to most of it. The fan questions were pretty cool. Some of them I kind of knew the answer to, like where he came up with the Iced Earth band name and stuff like that. But it was interesting hearing him talk about a lot of the subjects he talked about. And of course, you know, his standing with some of the former members of the band. Now, I think Hansi Kirsch, again, incredibly nice guy. And clearly he handled the situation in regards to what happened with Jon the right way. And, you know, they're still friends even to this day. So anyhow, I'm going to move on to the next subject. I think we should forgive Stu Block, let it go, move forward from it, and move on. Let's get to the last subject here, and one that I'm really excited to talk about, and that is the new Kreator song. Kreator, of course, a legendary thrash band from Germany. I'm really, really excited for the new song called Seven Serpents. Now, you know, I love Kreator, and, you know, you had the kind of like the big three of German thrash with Kreator, Sodom, and Destruction. Kreator was my favorite and still is my favorite of those three bands. But they have a new album coming out in January called Crushers of the World. And this first new song, Seven Serpents, does not disappoint at all. I would probably say that Kreator, for the last 15 years has probably put out their best material. You had the early stuff that had come out. And Pleasure to Kill. That album actually is very, very good. That came out in the 80s. You kind of had the 90s stuff with, weird albums like Endorama. But I think when Hordes of Chaos came out, that's when they really started to infuse. They started to become a little more aggressive. But when they were doing that, they were mixing in a little more melody into their music. And then over the last 15 years since that album came out, I don't think Kreator has missed at all. In fact, I think they're one of the better of the old school thrash bands as far as their music is concerned. Their last album was in the top 5 for my albums of the year list. I love Phantom Antichrist. I think that is an incredible album. I mean, really, the last 15 years, Kreator has really hit the nail on the head. Now, this new song, Seven Serpents, here's what I love about it. Number one, it's very aggressive. But at the same time, and as these records have come out, they've infused more and more melody into these songs. And I think it's a formula that is working very well for them. And the reception to the song has been outstanding, but it's really a super aggressive song with a lot more melody infused into it, even more than the last couple albums, which actually had a lot of melody mixed into them. So, brand new Kreator, I'm really excited. And, when you talk about starting off January on a high note, I don't know. I can already tell this song is probably going to be a pretty good indicator of how great this record is actually going to be. I've already pre-ordered it. I'm going to share a link in the show notes where you can also pre-order the upcoming album Crushers of the World. And I'm really excited for it. Just like this upcoming Testament album that's coming out in October. I can't wait until January when this new Kreator album actually does come out. I'm really, really, really excited for this. And I think it just continues on the progression of their music. I mean, like I said, ever since, Hordes of Chaos, they've infused more and more melody into their music. Like the old stuff is just pure aggression, essentially. Then they started experimenting a little bit more in the 90s. And now the band is uber aggressive. They have started to add a lot of melody into their music. And in a sense, I can't name another thrash band that even sounds like them. Like there's nobody out there making any kind of thrash metal music that sounds like Kreator. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons I like the band. I'm sure there's more to come. I'm sure we are going to have another 2 or 3 singles before this next record comes out. But I would definitely pre-order it. It comes out in January. It's called Crushers of the World. I put a link in the show notes to pre-order it. And, of course, a link to the song itself if you have not checked it out. But I'm really looking forward to it, folks. Again, these guys are legends to me. Anyhow, that's all I have for you today here on the Metal Command podcast. Of course, I'm really excited for the new Testament coming out. Of course, this new Kreator album I'm excited for. I have a lot of other records I'm going to be reviewing on the next episode. I have an interview I'm going to be putting up here very shortly as well with Giles Lavery to talk about the new Dragon's Claw album. I have a lot in store for you, folks. However, for today, that's all I have. Thanks for watching. Again, thanks for supporting the show. Stay metal. Hey, it's Tony here from the Metal Command Show. I want to thank you for watching this portion of the program. Since 1998, I have hosted the show, which started off as a radio program and is now into the podcast format. So I want to thank you for watching and or listening. And if you want to support the program, hit the subscribe button, hit that little bell to be notified anytime I do post any content. A lot of you have been supporting the show and really helping this show grow, and I cannot do it without all of you. So with that said, thanks for watching. Stay metal.